Mr.Archive.
Welcome again, listener. It's me, Mr. Archive. Another night, another forgotten chapter waiting to be opened. I hope you kept your clocks close because tonight's story is about time. Not the kind you see on a watch or measure in hours, but the kind that refuses to move on. There are stories that live between seconds, hidden in the silence of ticking gears. And one of those stories belongs to a man who tried to fix what no longer beat. He was called the Watchmaker of the Dead. So sit back, let the world outside grow quiet, and listen closely. Because every tick you hear might not be your clock. It might be his. The rain had not stopped for 7 days. Not the kind that cleanses the world, but the kind that lingers, heavy, deliberate, as though time itself had forgotten how to move on. In the middle of a drowned town, beneath the skeletal frame of an old clock tower, a faint light still flickered. No one in the village remembered when the tower last chimed. No one but the man who lived beneath it, the watchmaker. They said he came after the great flood, when the graves had floated open and the river carried names instead of fish. He found a place among the ruins where gears and glass survived better than hearts and homes. He repaired clocks that no longer had owners, and every night he wound them all, hundreds of them, each tick blending into the next, until the silence outside was swallowed whole. His name had been forgotten long before he stopped speaking it. To the few who dared bring him broken timepieces, he was simply the watchmaker. But among the townsfolk who feared his midnight tolls, they whispered another name, the keeper of the last hour. Inside his shop, time was not measured by minutes, but by memories. Each clock he repaired came from the ruins of someone's life. A burnt farmhouse, a collapsed bridge, a coffin washed ashore. He cataloged them quietly, carving initials into the brass frames, then setting them all to tick in unison. One night, as thunder rumbled over the horizon, a woman came to his door. Her dress was soaked, her hair clung to her face, and her hands trembled as she held out a shattered pocket watch. "It belonged to my husband," she whispered. He drowned last winter, but I keep hearing it tick in my dreams." The watchmaker said nothing. He took the watch from her palms and opened it under the lamplight. The gears inside were blackened, corroded by salt and time. Yet something pulsed faintly at its core, a heartbeat trapped between seconds. He nodded once. "Come back when the rain stops." The woman looked around, uneasy. "Does it ever stop here?" The watchmaker smiled faintly. "Not for the living." That night, the clocks in his shop began to move on their own, their hands aligned, all pointing toward midnight, then stopped. The room fell silent. Even the storm outside seemed to hold its breath. The watchmaker placed the broken pocket watch on his bench and began to work. But as he lifted the tiny screwdriver, something strange happened. The minute hand twitched as if guiding him. He followed its silent rhythm, loosening a screw here, tightening another there, until a hidden compartment revealed itself behind the dial. Inside was a sliver of bone, carved with a name, Elias. The watchmaker's hands froze. He knew that name. He remembered carving it once, not on bone, but on a coffin lid. He leaned closer. The faint heartbeat grew louder, echoing through the gears. Then came the whisper, a voice not carried by air, but by memory. "Why did you leave me there?" The watchmaker's tools fell from his grasp. The room was suddenly colder, as though every clock in the shop had stopped breathing. He turned, and through the fogged window, he saw a figure standing in the rain, still watching, the outline of a man half drowned in shadow. Elias. The watchmaker didn't sleep that night. He sat in front of the pocket watch, staring at it until dawn, the ticking inside now matching the rhythm of his own pulse. When the sun failed to rise, as it often did in this place, he wound every clock in the shop again, but one refused to start. It was a wall clock with hands shaped like skeletal fingers. He had found it years ago, washed ashore beside a child's shoe. Every time he wound it, the air grew colder. Every time it stopped, another name vanished from the town's memorial wall. He looked at it now and saw something different. Its reflection in the window wasn't his shop, but a graveyard. And in that reflection, each grave had a clock instead of a stone. He closed his eyes. It's happening again. There were things the watchmaker had sworn to forget. Before the flood, before the silence, before the clocks. Once, he had been an apprentice to a man who built not timepieces, but promises. A craftsman who believed that time could be used to heal the dead. Time doesn't end, his master used to say. It only changes owners. They built a machine together, a great pendulum meant to reverse decay, to turn rust into gold and breath into being. But when they tested it, the river ran backward for 3 days, and then the flood came. Every life it touched was pulled between moments, neither alive nor gone, just ticking in place. The apprentice survived. The master did not. And from the wreckage, the apprentice became the watchmaker, cursed to hear every second the world had lost. The woman returned days later. Her dress was dry now, but her eyes were not. "Did you fix it?" she asked. The watchmaker held out the pocket watch. "It works, but it remembers." She hesitated. "Remembers?" "Every tick is a breath," he said. "Every second, a step closer to where he waits." The woman stared at the watch, trembling. Can I see him again?" The watchmaker looked away. "Only if you're willing to lose your place in time." She didn't answer. She only reached for the watch, and the moment her fingers touched it, the shop disappeared. They stood together in the middle of the drowned town, but it was no longer broken. The river ran clear. The bells in the tower sang again, and a man stood by the water, smiling. "Elias," she whispered. He turned to her, but his eyes were hollow, filled with moving gears. His smile cracked, and water spilled from his mouth like sand. The woman screamed. The world twisted, and when it snapped back, the watchmaker was alone again, her body lying motionless on the floor, the pocket watch clutched tightly in her hands. He closed her eyes gently. Another clock stopped. From that day on, people stopped bringing him their broken timepieces. The town grew quieter, emptier, until only the sound of the clock tower remained, and even that began to fade. But the watchmaker didn't stop. He kept working, collecting, remembering. Each clock that reached his table was another life asking to be wound again, another voice whispering from beneath the water. He started to keep a journal, not of names, but of moments. The child who never woke, the man who drowned twice, the woman who followed her echo, and finally one entry that trembled on the page: "The day I stopped dying." One evening, as he wound the last clock, he noticed something he'd never seen before. The shadows on the wall were moving opposite the hands, time running backward, and in the center of the room, the broken pocket watch began to glow. He picked it up, and the light bled through his skin, showing veins like wires, bones like gears. His heartbeat faltered, replaced by the slow mechanical rhythm of ticking metal. He understood then. He had never truly fixed these clocks. He had been repairing himself, piece by piece, using the time of the dead, the watchmaker of the dead. The door creaked open. Outside, the floodwaters had receded, revealing a vast field of broken watches gleaming under a gray sky. Each one ticked softly, like rain returning to the sea. He stepped outside, his boots sinking into the mud. Every tick grew louder, forming a chorus of time long forgotten. And in that sound, he heard their voices, all the souls he'd borrowed from, calling him home. He walked toward the river where his reflection waited, but the reflection smiled first. "You can't fix what never stopped," it said. He dropped the pocket watch into the water. The ripples spread outward, turning the river to glass. And in that mirror, he saw them, hundreds of faces staring back, each with the faint outline of gears beneath their skin. The clocks in his chest began to unwind. The world slowed, and for the first time, the rain stopped. When the townspeople finally entered the clock tower, they found nothing but silence. The shop was gone. The walls, the tools, the man, all vanished. Only one clock remained, still ticking, its hands forever frozen at the moment the storm ended. On its face, a faint inscription, "Time belongs to those who dare to remember." And from somewhere deep beneath the floorboards, faintly like a whisper through gears, tick, tick, tick. The watchmaker's work was not done, because as long as one clock still ticked, the dead were never truly gone. You still there, listener? I can feel your pulse slowing a little. Same rhythm as his clocks, maybe. Strange, isn't it? A man trying to fix time, only to realize time was fixing him instead. What do you think? Was he cursed, or just desperate to hold on to what he lost? And tell me, if you had a watch that could bring someone back even for 1 minute, would you use it? Let me know your thoughts. Leave your piece of time down below. I read every one of them, because here in the archive, every story deserves to be remembered. You've just heard the end of Book 5. Quite a strange one, wasn't it? That story left us wondering how much of what we remember is truly ours, and how much was borrowed by time itself. It's funny. Every time we close one book here in the forgotten history, another one quietly opens on its own. Almost like these stories are connected, as if one secret naturally leads us to the next. And tonight, that next secret begins in a place long vanished from the maps, a place whispered about by those who claim to have seen it, yet can no longer find their way back. Let's open it together. Welcome, dear listener, to Book 6, The Hourglass of Hollow Vale. They say the valley once stood beneath a perpetual twilight, neither day nor night, always caught in the in-between. It was called HollowVale, a quiet town built between two ridges that bent like the arms of an hourglass. And maybe that shape wasn't just coincidence, because time in HollowVale did not behave like anywhere else. Clocks refused to agree with one another. Watches slowed, then leapt ahead without warning. Even the shadows of trees would stretch one way in the morning and another by noon. At first, no one questioned it. Strange things happen in forgotten towns. But then came the disappearances. People began losing hours, entire chunks of their day erased from memory. They'd wake to find the sun in a different place, meals half-eaten, candles burned low, and always, somewhere nearby, there was the faint sound of sand falling, like a distant, unseen hourglass being turned over and over again. One woman, Marin Hale, kept a diary. She was a school teacher, practical and steady, the kind of person who always needed things to make sense. Her entries were precise: times, dates, lessons, even the weather, until one page simply read, "The children froze mid-sentence." I blinked. The room was empty. The clock said the same time as yesterday. That was the last she ever wrote. Weeks later, a stranger arrived in HollowVale, a historian named Jonas Varick, who'd heard rumors of the valley where time unraveled. He carried an antique hourglass in a brass case, its glass faintly smoked, the sand inside black as ink. He said it once belonged to a watchmaker who tried to measure eternity. Jonas came to study the valley, but what he found instead began to study him. It started with reflections. His pocket watch would show a time several minutes ahead of his wristwatch. His shadow at dusk moved before he did, as though anticipating his steps. At night, the hourglass beside his bed turned itself even when he was awake to watch. He began to dream of sand, endless dunes whispering his name, and in every dream a tower stood at the horizon built entirely of glass. Inside it, thousands of hourglasses turned in perfect rhythm, each one containing a flickering image, moments from different lives trapped like insects in amber. Jonas would wake gasping, his bedsheets covered in fine black dust. He wasn't alone in his visions. The townsfolk had started gathering in the square at night, waiting for the sky to change. They claimed that at exactly midnight, the stars would pause, the entire heavens holding still as though caught in a single frame of time. And when that happened, a bell would ring from the hills. But there was no bell in HollowVale. The next morning, the bakery's sign had changed. It now read, "Yesterday's bread." No one remembered repainting it. Then one evening, Jonas found the diary of Marin Hale. Only now the pages he'd never seen before had appeared, written in his own handwriting. "The sand is listening. Don't turn the hourglass again." He dropped it immediately. The glass cracked, black sand spilled onto the floor and began to flow upward, defying gravity. It twisted in the air, forming a thin spiral that grew brighter until the walls themselves turned transparent. And behind those walls, Jonas saw the tower from his dreams. Only this time, it wasn't a vision. It was inside the valley, towering above the ridges. And from its peak, a single beam of light cut through the clouds, pulsing like the ticking of a heart. Jonas followed it. The path wound between graves whose names had been erased by time. Each step closer made his body feel heavier, as if time itself pressed against him. The tower door stood open. Inside, everything was silent except the steady hiss of falling sand. He climbed. Every level held shelves upon shelves of hourglasses, some whole, some shattered, all filled with that same black sand. And inside each one, he saw faces, flickering like old film reels, people reliving the same moments over and over. At the top, a woman waited. Her eyes glowed faintly, as if lit from within. She wore the robes of a timekeeper, yet her face was ageless, a shifting mask between youth and age. "You turned it," she said softly. Her voice echoed from every wall. "Once turned, the hourglass remembers you. It follows its maker." Jonas held up the cracked hourglass. "What is this place?" She smiled, almost kindly. Hollow Vale is the gap between seconds, the place where lost moments fall. You all created it every time you wished to go back, every time you tried to hold on. She reached out and touched the glass of the hourglass in his hands. The black sand began to glow red. Now, it remembers you too. The tower shuddered. Hourglasses burst, one after another, spilling their contents into the air. A storm of memories, laughter, screams, cries, all looping endlessly. Jonas dropped to his knees as time fractured around him. Every version of him, past, present, future, flickered into the room, overlapping like broken reflections. The woman stepped back into the storm and whispered, "Let go, or you'll be buried in the moment you fear most." Jonas looked down. The hourglass in his hands was almost empty. Only a few grains of black sand remained, each one showing an image of him leaving the valley, living, aging, forgetting. He hesitated. Then he turned the hourglass one final time. Everything stopped. The tower, the sand, the wind, all frozen. For one perfect, terrible second, HollowVale ceased to exist. Then, with a sound like a breath being released, it all dissolved into dust. When dawn came, travelers passing through the mountain road found only a plain valley. No town, no tower. Only a small glass hourglass half buried in the dirt, filled with black sand that never stopped moving. They say that if you listen closely, you can still hear a bell ring at midnight, though no one knows where from. And if you ever find that hourglass, don't turn it, because the moment you do, time will remember your name. Discussion segment, Mr. Archive. You know, I keep thinking about Jonas Varick. He didn't seek power or glory or even truth, just understanding. But maybe that's the real danger of curiosity. Sometimes knowing why something is forgotten is what makes it start again. What do you think, listener? Was HollowVale ever real? Or was it a reflection of our own obsession with time? Would you have turned the hourglass just to see what you'd remember? I'd love to hear your thoughts, theories, interpretations, even what you think that black sand really was. Drop them in the comments, because every question you ask keeps the archive alive a little longer. And if this story kept you here till the very end, thank you. Your curiosity is the heartbeat that keeps the forgotten history turning. Until the next page reveals itself, keep your clocks close and your memories closer.